Hi team, Ms. Vaughn here to talk to you about chapter 18. Okay, so we finished chapter 17, and in chapter 17, Stampede confronts Paul D with the information that Setha killed her own child. He tells it to him because he was an eyewitness, and then he also shows him the newspaper clipping that does the reporting that says that Setha killed her own child. But Paul D is really reluctant to receive this information. We've seen this at other parts of the book before. So we saw it first when Setha sees Beloved on the steps of 124. Her body tells her that that's her child by her water breaking, but she doesn't fully accept that Beloved is her child until the end of chapter 14. We also saw it with Denver when she's in the memory of why she stopped going to school. And that young boy asked her the question, like, hey, isn't your mom, we talked about this in class, hey, isn't your mom the person who killed your sister? And then Denver, she goes home and she asks her mom and baby Suggs that question. And she's so ill prepared to receive the truth that she just shuts down and she doesn't talk and she doesn't hear anything for 2 years after that. So there's this trend that's happening where it's really hard for people to be able to accept truth in general, but then like really hard truths is even harder. So with this idea of truth, um, I want you to put yourself in this scene in 124 at the beginning of chapter 18. And Paul D and Setha are going to be having a conversation in the living room. Paul D, I imagine that before the chapter starts, that Paul D has asked Setha, is this true? Did you kill your child? And instead of Setha just saying outright, yes, I did, she feels like, or it's implied that she owes Paul D an explanation. So instead of just saying it outright, yes, she's going to go back and tell the story in a very roundabout way. Um, so there's going to be like lots of things in reference to things being round and also things being spinning, because she's not only like physically spinning around the room, like pacing, but her thoughts are also spinning too. And she's also thinking about those instincts that went into play when she snatched her children and took them out into the shed. Okay, page 187. She was crawling already when I got here. This is Setha speaking. 1 week less, and the baby who was sitting up and turning over when I put her on the wagon was crawling already. Devil of a time keeping her off the stairs. Nowadays, babies get up and walk as soon as you drop them. But 20 years ago, when I was a girl, babies stayed babies longer. Howard didn't pick up his own head till he was 9 months. Baby Suggs said it was the food, you know? If you ain't got nothing but milk to give him, well, they don't do things so quick. Milk was all I ever had. I thought teeth meant that he was ready to chew. Wasn't nobody to ask. Mrs. Garner never had no children, and we was the only women there. Okay, so Setha is setting up this idea here. If you can pause and write in your book, she didn't have anyone there to teach her how to be a mother. And she's not telling Paul D that explicitly, but she is implying it with the way that she's talking about how she didn't really know what to do. Like she knew instinctually that she needed to feed them, but she didn't know like at what age they should be doing what things. And Mrs. Garner never had children, so there was no one there to provide her with guidance. She was spinning round and around the room, past the jelly cupboard, past the window, past the front door, another window, the sideboard, the keeping room door, the dry sink, the stove, back to the jelly cupboard. Paul D sat at the table watching her drift into view, then disappear behind his back, turning like a slow but steady wheel. Sometimes she crossed her hands behind her back, other times she held her ears, covering her mouth or folded her arms across her breast. Once in a while, she rubbed her hips as she turned, but the wheel never stopped. Remember Aunt Phyllis from out by Minnowville? Mr. Garner sent one of you all to get her for each and every one of my babies. That'd be the only time I saw her. Many's the time I wanted to get over to where she was just to talk. My plan was to ask Mrs. Garner to let me off at Minnowville while she went to a meeting, pick me up on her way back. I believe she would have done it if I was to ask her. I never did because that's the only day Hallie and me had with sunlight in it for the both of us to see each other by. So there wasn't nobody to talk to, I mean, who'd know when it was time to chew up a little something and give it to them. Is that what make the teeth come on out, or should you wait till the teeth came and then solid food? Well, I know now because baby Suggs fed her right. And a week later, when I got here, she was crawling already. No stopping her either. She loved those steps. So much we painted them so she could see her way to the top. Setha smiled then at the memory of it. The smile broke into and became a sudden suck of air, but she did not shudder or close her eyes. She wheeled. Okay, she wheeled. So remember, she's like kind of spinning throughout the room, but not like a whimsy spin. She's more like pacing and is like moving with some anxiety. I wish I'd known I wish I'd known more, but like I said, there wasn't nobody to talk to, woman, I mean. So I tried to recollect what I'd seen back where I was before Sweet Home, how the woman did it there. Oh, they knew all about it. How to make that thing you used to hang the babies in trees so you could see them out of harm's way while you worked the fields. Was a leaf thing too they gave him to chew on. Mint, I believe, or sassafras, comfrey maybe. I still don't know how they constructed that basket thing, but I didn't need it anyway because all my work was in the barn and the house, but I forgot what the leaf was. I could have used that. I tied Bugler when we had all the pork to smoke, fire everywhere, and he was getting into everything. I liked to lost him so many times. Once he got up on a well right on it. I flew, snatched him just in time. So when I knew he'd be rendering the smoking and I couldn't see after him, well, I got a rope and tied it around his ankle. Okay, so here she's talking about how, yes, she didn't have all of the knowledge to be able to know, like, okay, at this week, the babies should be eating this kind of food. But she is saying that she did have motherly instinct to be able to protect her children because one time when Bugler almost fell in a well, she was able to snatch him before he fell in. So in her head, she's kind of like, I didn't have mother instincts in some ways, but I also had mother instincts in another. And she's going to continue here at the top of 189. Just long enough to play around a little, but not long enough to reach the well or the fire. I didn't like the look of it, but I didn't know what else to do. It's hard, you know what I mean? By yourself and no woman to help you get through. Hallie was good, but he was debt working all over the place. And when he did get down to a little sleep, I didn't want to be bothering him with all that. 6-0 was the biggest help. Our boy 6-0, don't we love him? I don't suspect you remember this, but Howard got in the milk parlor and Red Cora, I believe it was, mashed his hand, turned his thumb backwards. When I got to him, she was getting ready to bite it. I don't know to this day how I got him out. 6-0 heard him screaming and come running. Know what he did? Turned the thumb right back and tied it across his palm to his little finger. See? I never would have thought of that. Never. Taught me a lot, 6-0. Okay, now it's gonna move to Paul D, and he's gonna be kind of like in a daze about this because remember he asked him this very, very direct question of like, is this true? Did you kill your child? And Seth is going way back into their sweet home times. So he probably thinks a little bit that she's avoiding the question. Middle of page 189. It made him dizzy. At first, he thought it was her spinning, circling him the way she was circling the subject. Round and round, never changing direction, which might have helped his head. Then he thought, no, it's the sound of her voice. It's too near. Each turn she made was at least 3 yards from where he sat. But listening to her was like having a child whisper into your ear so close you could feel its lips form the words. You couldn't make out because they were too close. He caught only pieces of what she said, which was fine because she hadn't gotten to the main part, the answer to the question he had not asked outright, but which lay in the clipping he showed her. Okay, so again, he doesn't ask her outright. He just takes the newspaper clipping that Stampede gave him and he slides it over to her for her to see. Okay. And lay in the smile as well, because he smiled too when he showed it to her. So when she burst out laughing at the joke, the mix-up of her face put where some other colored woman's ought to be, well, he'd be ready to laugh right along with her. Can you beat it? He would ask. And Stampede done lost his mind, she would giggle. Plum lost it. But his smile never got a chance to grow. It hung there, small and alone, while she examined the clipping and then handed it back. Perhaps it was the smile or maybe the ever-ready love she saw in his eyes, easy and upfront, the way colts, evangelists, and children look at you, with love you don't have to deserve, that made her go ahead and tell him what she had not told Baby Suggs, the only person she felt obliged to explain anything to. Otherwise, she would have said what the newspaper said, she said, and no more. Seth could recognize only 75 printed words, half of which appeared in the newspaper clipping, but she knew that the words she did not understand hadn't any more power than she had to explain. It was the smile and the upfront love that made her try. I don't have to tell you about Sweet Home, what it was, but maybe you don't know what it was like for me to get away from there. Covering the lower half of her face with her palm, she paused to consider again the size of the miracle, its flavor. I did it. I got us all out, without Hallie too. Up till then, it was the only thing I ever did on my own, decided, and it came off right, like it was supposed to. We was here, each and every one of my babies, and me too. I birthed them and I got them out, and it wasn't no accident. I did that. I had help, of course, lots of that, but still, it was me doing it. Me saying, go on, and now. Me having to look out. Me using my own head. But it was more than that. It was a kind of selfishness I never knew nothing about before. It felt good, good and right. I was big Paul D and deep and wide. When I stretched out my arms, all my children could get in between. I was that wide. Looked like I loved them more after I got here. Or maybe I couldn't love them proper in Kentucky because they wasn't mine to love. Okay, so again, there's this detail of ownership. If you want to make a little note here, she says, or maybe I couldn't love him proper in Kentucky at Sweet Home because they wasn't mine to love. Because remember, we learned about Margaret Garner, and Margaret Garner did not get charged with murder. She got charged with stolen property because of her murdering her own child. So this motherly possessiveness that I think a lot of mothers experience, it is accelerated, deepened, intensified in Setha when she goes from being enslaved to being free, because she feels so free that she's able to love her children the way that she wants to. But when I got here, when I jumped down off the wagon, there wasn't nobody in the world I couldn't love if I wanted to. You know what I mean? Paul D did not answer because she did not expect or want him to, but he did know what she meant. Listening to the doves in Alfred, Georgia, and having neither the right nor the permission to enjoy it, because in that place, mist, doves, sunlight, copper dirt, moon, everything belonged to the men who had the guns. Little men, some of them, big men too, each one of whom he could snap like a twig if he wanted to. Men who knew their manhood lay in their guns and were not even embarrassed by the knowledge that without gunshot, Fox would laugh at them. And these men who made even Vixen laugh could, if you let them, stop you from hearing doves or loving moonlight. So you protected yourself and loved small. Pick the tiniest stars out of the sky to own. Lay down with head twisted in order to see the loved one over the rim of the trench before you slept. Stole shy glances at her between the trees that chain up. Grass blades, salamanders, spiders, woodpeckers, beetles, and a kingdom of ants. Anything bigger wouldn't do. A woman, a child, a brother, a big love like that would split you wide open in Alfred, Georgia. He knew exactly what she meant, to get to a place where you could love anything you chose, not to need permission for desire. Well, now, that was freedom. Okay, Paul D previously could not relate to Setha in the way that she loves her children, but in this instance, he was like, oh yeah, I do kind of get that, because for him, he's locked everything in his tobacco tin. So he's like, my whole life I've loved with restraint, because he knew that whatever he did love, very similar to baby Suggs, could ultimately be taken away from him, or he could be taken away from them. So vice versa. Circling, circling. Now she was 9-something else instead of getting to the point. There was this piece of goods Mrs. Garner gave me, calico, stripes it had with little flowers in between, about a yard, not enough for more than a head tie. But I've been wanting to make a shift for my girl with it. Had the prettiest colors. I don't even know what you call that color. A rose, but with yellow in it. For the longest time, I've been meaning to make it for her. And you know, like a fool, I left it behind. No more than a yard. I kept putting it off because I was tired or didn't have the time. So when I got here, even before they let me out of the bed, I stitched her a little something from the piece of cloth baby Suggs had. Well, all I'm saying is that a selfish pleasure I never had before. I couldn't let all that go back to where it was, and I couldn't let her nor any of them live under school teacher. That was out. Setha knew that the circle she was making around the room, him, the subject would remain one, that she could never close in, pin it down for anybody who had to ask. If they didn't get it right off, she could never explain. Okay, so if we can make note of that in our book right there on page 192, the fact that she's trying to explain it to him, but then she gets to a point where she's like, if I have to explain it to you, you're never actually going to understand, which I feel like we've all experienced at some point in our life in different contexts. Because the truth was, not a long, drawn-out record of flowered shifts, tree cages, selfishness, ankle ropes, and wells. Simple. She was squatting in the garden, and when she saw them coming and recognized school teacher's hat, she heard wings. Little hummingbirds stuck their needle beaks right through her headcloth into her hair and beat their wings. And if she thought anything, it was no, 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 no. Simple. She just flew, collected every bit of life she had made, all the parts of her that were precious and fine and beautiful, and carried, pushed, dragged them through the veil, out, away, over there, where no one could hurt them, over there, outside this place, where they would be safe. And the hummingbird wings beat on. Okay, think about a hummingbird. Hopefully, you've watched a hummingbird at some point in your life. Hummingbirds' bodies, they move very steadily, but their wings beat very furiously. So for Setha, yes, she is in fight or flight mode, but she very decisively, like a hummingbird, is moving along to make this decision to kill her children in order to protect them, to show that she loves them. She grabs her children and then she makes the decision to kill them. So yes, steady but quick. The wings beating. That's important for you to know. So if you can write that down there for the metaphor that's happening. Okay. Setha paused in her circle again and looked out the window. She remembered when the yard had a fence with a gate that somebody was always latching and unlatching, and the time in 124 was busy as a way station. She did not see the white boys who pulled it down, yanked up the post, and smashed the gate, leaving 124 desolate and exposed at the very hour when everybody stopped dropping by. The shoulder weeds of Bluestone Road were all that came toward the house. When she got back from the jailhouse, she was glad the fence was gone. That's where they had hitched their horses, where she saw floating above the railing as she squatted in the garden school teacher's hat. By the time she faced him, looked him dead in the eye, she had something in her arms that stopped him in his tracks. He took a backward step with each jump of the baby heart until finally there were none. Okay, so she also, when she kills Beloved and they go into the shed and they catch her in there, she stares school teacher right in the eyes as she's holding dead Beloved in her arms. Okay, so then she's still talking to Paul D here. I stopped him, she said, staring at the place where the fence used to be. I took and put my babies where they'd be safe. The roaring in Paul D's head did not prevent him from hearing the pat she gave to the last word, and it occurred to him that what she wanted for her children was exactly what was missing from 124, safety, which was the very first message he got the day he walked through the door. He thought he had made it safe, had gotten rid of the danger, beat the shit out of it, run it off the place, and showed it and everybody else the difference between a mule and a plow. And because she had not done it before he had got there her own self, he thought it was because she could not do it, that she lived with 124 in helpless, apologetic resignation because she had no choice, that minus husband, sons, mother-in-law, she and her slow-witted daughter had to live there all alone, making do. The prickly, mean-eyed, sweet home girl he knew as Hallie's girl was obedient, like Hallie, shy, like Hallie, and work crazy, like Hallie. He was wrong. This here Setha was new. The ghost in her house didn't bother her for the very same reason a room and board witch with new shoes was welcome. This here Setha talked about love like any other woman, talked about baby clothes like any other woman, but what she meant could cleave the bone. This here Setha talked about safety with a handsaw. So he's trying to tell her, or he's having this realization how contradictory her meaning of love is, that she cannot defend her murder by saying that it's love because it's like talking about safety with a handsaw. This here new Setha didn't know where the world stopped and she began. Suddenly he saw what Stampede wanted him to see. More important than what Setha had done was what she claimed, and it scared him. Your love is too thick, he said, thinking. That bitch is looking right at me. She's right over my head, looking down through the floor to me. So Beloved is above them, watching them, and Paul D is picking up the hint that he's being pushed out of the house, and this is the beginning of that end of Paul D being in 124. Too thick, she said, thinking of the clearing where baby Suggs's commands knocked the pods off horse chestnuts. Love is or it ain't. Thin love ain't love at all. Yeah? It didn't work, did it? Did it work? He asked. It worked, she said. How? Your boys are gone and you don't know where. One girl dead, the other won't leave the yard. How did it work? They ain't at Sweet Home. School teacher ain't got him. Maybe there's worse. It ain't my job to know what's worse. It's my job to know what is and to keep them away from what I know is terrible. I did that. What you did was wrong, Setha. I should have gone back there, taken my babies back there. There could have been a way, some other way. What way? You got 2 feet, Setha, not 4, he said. And right then, a forest sprang up between them, trackless and quiet. Okay, we had talked so much about how there's been dehumanization, even the fact that Paul D knows the pain of not only being compared to an animal, but feeling less than an animal with Mr. And so when he tells Setha, you have 2 feet, not 4, he's accusing her of being animalistic, which is a pretty terrible offense that he makes against her. So then right after that, if you all can make note in your book, it says, right then a forest sprang up between them, trackless and quiet. So it's like there's this huge barrier or divide between them that they're going to have a very hard time coming back from. Later, he would wonder what made him say it, the calves of his youth or the conviction that he was being observed through the ceiling. How fast he had moved from his shame to hers, from his cold house secret straight to her too thick love. Meanwhile, the forest was locking the distance between them, giving it shape and heft. He did not put his hat on right away. First, he fingered it, deciding how his going would be, how to make it an exit, not an escape. And it was very important not to leave without looking. He stood up, turned, and looked up the white stairs. She was there all right, standing straight as a line with her back to him. He didn't rush to the door. He moved slowly, and when he got there, he opened it before asking Setha to put supper aside for him because he might be a little late getting back. Only then did he put on his hat. Sweet, she thought. He must think I can't bear to hear him say it, that after all I have told him, and after telling me how many feet I have, goodbye would break me to pieces. Ain't that sweet? So long, she murmured from the far side of the trees. Okay, and if we can think all the way back to when Paul D first arrived to 124, that Setha was thinking about Baby Suggs and how Baby Suggs had told her or warned her that men will convince you to give a little bit of yourself. And then when you do that, when you think your life is being made easier, that's when they go away. And that's exactly what's happened to Setha. That Paul D told her, I want to have a family with you. I want you to have my children. She thought that they were building a life together. She tells him this news, and then that's like the breaking point. And then also, if we can think all the way back to when he first moves into 124, he tells Setha, like, you can go as deep inside to all of your pain. And he tells her, like, I'm going to be there to catch you or to pull you out when you go deep inside of yourself. And he has proved himself a liar because he cannot handle this information. And so he leaves 124 at the beginning of, or at the end of part 1 of the book. So now Setha, Denver, and Beloved are going to be locked in 124 for the next string of chapters that are going to be very interesting for us to read. All right. Get your quotes done, analyze them, bring them to class, and I'll see you on Monday.